Life goes on behind the prison walls, and for some of these notorious criminals, conditions are worse than you might have imagined.
Considering the terrible nature of his crimes, it's no wonder that Harvey Weinstein's life behind bars is even worse than you can imagine. In March 2020, Harvey Weinstein was sentenced to 20 years for a first-degree criminal sex act and another 3 for third-degree rape. Then in February 2023, he was sentenced to a further 16 years for another rape. Weinstein's predatory behavior was pretty much an open secret in the movie world for decades, and his guilty verdicts were widely celebrated. However, the 2020 sentence was overturned in April 2024, after a court determined that he hadn't received a fair hearing. Plenty of observers have been eager to know what life in prison would be like for Weinstein. Would he get a cushy, Club Fed-style setup, or instead be forced to do hard time? It soon became clear that the disgraced mogul would have to prepare himself for the latter. As of 2024, Weinstein is a resident at the infamous Rikers Island Jail in New York City, specifically the West Facility. The West Facility opened in 1991 and consists of single-cell units, some of which house inmates with contagious diseases. Unsurprisingly, Weinstein's life inside the jail is far from rosy. Rikers has a notorious reputation for some very good reasons. 15 inmates died there in 2021 alone, at least 6 of them from suicide. A July 2023 report found that the facility was overcrowded, understaffed, dangerous, filthy, and crawling with cockroaches, mice, and ants, among other vermin. As Veronica Vella of the Legal Aid Society told CBS News, "We saw showers that are covered in mildew, inches of soap scum, little drain flies coming out of the drains, and these are areas where people are going to try to get clean." And as a former inmate told Curbed in September 2021, "There's no correctional officers. They're not feeding people. There's no water, no showers, no phone calls. There's people there that haven't took showers in 2 weeks or longer. You barely eat. They don't care. There were people in cells having seizures and they just left them there. I was in a cell with about 30 other people. You could be sleeping and they'd spray mace or come banging on the cells for no reason, just to wake you up."
Hell. Plain and simple, hell.
Clearly, it's safe to say that Harvey Weinstein is not living a pampered life on Rikers Island. In contrast, he had been enjoying a relatively cushy treatment in Bellevue Hospital's intensive care unit, where he was admitted in April 2024, after his 2020 conviction was overturned. He had his own private room with an ensuite bathroom, a dedicated phone line, and a TV. He reportedly spent his days there lazing in bed watching CNN, chatting with his attorneys, and ordering Pepsi. As one of his lawyer insisted to the city in May 2024, "He's a sick man. Harvey has multiple health issues, and he's never gotten the level of care that he received prior to going into custody." However, after doctors evaluated Weinstein, they determined that he didn't need any specialist treatment for the chest and abdominal pain his legal team insisted he was suffering from. So he was then sent straight back to Rikers just days later. However, it is clear that Weinstein is reportedly struggling with rotting teeth. As he told a judge in September 2022, "I'm in pain every day. I have cavities, and I can't eat because I'm missing teeth." Weinstein begged the court to allow him to pay for private dental treatment because the prison service would otherwise just pull his teeth out. Then in October 2024, it became clear that that wasn't his only serious health struggle, as it was reported that he'd been diagnosed with bone marrow cancer.
30 years ago, Susan Smith went to prison for the infamous murder of her 2 young sons. In 2024, she came up for parole but was denied. Just how bad is her life in prison? It may surprise you. From the beginning, Smith was far from a model inmate. A file obtained by People revealed Smith had committed a variety of serious infractions, including self-mutilation and possession of contraband. She was also disciplined twice for drug-related incidents, losing her visitation, canteen, and phone privileges for a year each time. And in the early 2000s, 2 prison guards admitted to having sexual relationships with Smith. The officers pled guilty, and Smith was transferred to the Leith Correctional Institution in Greenwood, South Carolina, where she remains. Although this was another black mark in her record, the abuse of power aspect of these incidents shouldn't be ignored. But in 2020, a source inside the prison told People that Smith had suddenly started behaving herself. They explained, "She knows that her parole date is 4 years away and she can't get parole if she isn't being good." After 29 years behind bars, Smith came before the parole board on November 20th, 2024. She participated from prison through a video link. Throughout the proceeding, a tearful Smith was asked questions about the disciplinary infractions she committed during her time in the South Carolina Department of Corrections. Her weepy response boiled down to 2 words.
Just stupidity.
Smith was contrite-ish and went on to say what was expected.
I know I made a lot of mistakes in here, and I have learned from them.
However, after acknowledging her own growth and desire to make amends, the parole board still wasn't done with her. Above all, Smith needed to show remorse. Before the parole board could rule, she took a moment to admit that she understood and took responsibility for killing her boys.
I know that what I did was horrible, and I would give anything if I could go back and change it.
But Smith wasn't a victim. Smith's ex-husband, David, the boy's father, was there to speak for them and tell his side of the story. He appeared on screen with over a dozen supporters, including family members, legal representatives, and key members of the original prosecution team, all of whom pleaded with the authorities to deny Smith's request to be released.
This wasn't a tragic mistake. She purposely meant to end their life.
And it seems the parole panel took his words to heart. They voted unanimously to keep Smith locked up. For the unfamiliar who need a recap, the Susan Smith case was one of the most heinous and most publicized crimes of the 90s. On October 25, 1994, the 23-year-old Smith took her sons, 3-year-old Michael and 14-month-old Alex, out for a ride. Hours later, she called emergency services, frantic, claiming that an unknown black man had carjacked her and kidnapped the kids.
We will do anything we will to help you to get them home back to us.
For 9 days, Smith and her ex-husband David repeatedly appeared on television, begging for their safe return.
She looks at David and almost giggles like, we're going to be on TV.
Police quickly began to realize her story didn't add up, and they were right. How could someone be capable of such a horrendous crime? As a child, Smith had a lengthy history of untreated mental illness. She attempted suicide at 13 and was sexually abused by her stepfather, Beverly Russell, throughout her high school years. Although she reported the abuse to her school counselor, her stepfather, who was a prominent member of the Christian Coalition and the South Carolina Republican Party, managed to get the charges dropped. During Smith's trial, Russell admitted to molesting her in her teens and continuing an affair with her even after she was married.
They went from Susan the monster in January to Susan the victim in July.
After graduating from high school, Susan met and married David Smith, and they had 2 boys. Their marriage wasn't smooth sailing, however. There were periods of separation until their final split around 1994, which laid the groundwork for the tragedy to come. Soon after her marriage ended, Smith fell head over heels for a man named Tom Findley, but Findley, described by the New York Times as the son of a rich industrialist, broke up with Smith by letter in the fall of '94, explaining that he didn't want kids. Smith's 2 sons were a deal breaker. Smith apparently decided she couldn't live without Findley, so on the night of October 25th, she drove her children to a nearby lake, strapped them into their car seats, and rolled the car into the water. She then concocted the black carjacker story, temporarily winning the public over with her lies, but on November 3rd, she confessed to the murders.
The defense claimed a botched suicide, but she was able to save herself. She was able to blame a black guy. She wasn't wet.
After a highly publicized trial in which the death penalty was on the table, Smith was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. After Susan's 2024 parole hearing, David Smith mentioned in a press conference that his ex-wife will be able to seek parole again in 2 years, and when that time comes in 2026, he'll be back to advocate against her.
I haven't seen any remorse from her.
However, it seems that Susan Smith's legal team might be using these next 2 years to hatch a different strategy to gain her freedom. Back in 2015, Smith wrote a letter to The State, a local South Carolina newspaper, to try and take control of her own narrative. In it, she claimed, "Something went very wrong that night. I was not myself. I was a good mother and I loved my boys. There was no motive as it was not even a planned event. I was not in my right mind. I am not the monster society thinks I am."
In one call that was recorded, she says, "I've done my time. It's enough."
Smith's attorney, Tommy A. Thomas, is most likely behind this attempt to try to prove she's a changed woman. Whereas Thomas pointed out the crimes Smith committed were indeed atrocities during her parole hearing, he was quick to revisit the horrors Smith herself had to endure throughout her life, and how they should be considered in order to better understand her and how she got to such a desperate place. However, even if Smith were to be released, Thomas said, I don't think she will ever be able to forgive herself.
Prison isn't meant to be easy, but Joran Van Der Sloot's time behind bars has just gotten even worse. Van Der Sloot was initially jailed in 2012 after pleading guilty to the murder of Stephanie Flores. He strangled her in a hotel room in 2010. Speaking in court about the murder, Van Der Sloot told the judge, "Yes, I want to plead guilty. I wanted from the first moment to confess sincerely. I truly am sorry for this act. I feel very bad." Van Der Sloot was sentenced to 28 years in prison for Flores' murder. He then received an additional sentence for the Natalie Holloway murder case. After Holloway disappeared in 2005, the case took the world by storm, and even Dr. Phil got involved.
Somebody said, "Oh, that's Joran Van Der Sloot. He likes to prey upon young female tourists."
Van Der Sloot became a prime suspect but repeatedly denied that he was involved in her disappearance. In 2006, Van Der Sloot told ABC News, "The last time I saw her, she was sitting on the sand by the ocean." Years went by, but authorities could never get him to admit to any wrongdoing.
"He killed my sister." Who's to say he's not going to snap and kill somebody else?
Then in 2023, Van Der Sloot was extradited from Peru to the US because he faced extortion and wire fraud charges for taking money from Holloway's parents after telling them he would reveal the location of her body, although he ultimately never did. In order to get a lighter sentence for these charges, Van Der Sloot revealed the disturbing details of her murder. He admitted that he kicked Holloway hard enough to knock her out after she refused his sexual advances, then picked up a cinder block and hit her with it.
He said that after killing her on the beach in Aruba, he put her into the water, and that was the last that he ever saw her.
The confession turned out to be more shocking than anyone anticipated, yet it still led to a lighter plea deal for Van Der Sloot. He was ultimately sentenced to 20 years for extortion, a term that was set to run concurrently with his sentence for Flores' murder. However, his time in prison has likely been worse than many thought it would be. In April 2024, while serving his sentence at Peru's Chayapalca prison, Van Der Sloot was attacked by 2 inmates. Once the fight broke out, more inmates joined in before prison guards could intervene. Van Der Sloot was seen by medical professionals following the incident, despite only suffering minor bruises and cuts. Reps from the prison refused to reveal too many details from the attack, but shared with the New York Post that Van Der Sloot wouldn't face any repercussions because he didn't start the fight. Van Der Sloot's experience in Chayapalca was a complete 180 from what his prison time had been like just months prior. In October 2023, it was reported that he was living a cushy life in prison.
Peru's prison system allows inmates to wear their own clothing.
He bounced from Peruvian prison to Peruvian prison and reportedly had access to the internet, television, and a cell phone at certain locations. At one point, Van Der Sloot even felt cocky enough to threaten a prison official.
Joran Van Der Sloot threatened to kill the warden of the prison where he had been serving a 28-year term.
Besides all the amenities to which Van Der Sloot had access, he also struck up several romantic relationships with women on the outside. A February 2024 report in the New York Post revealed that Van Der Sloot was reportedly having sex with 3 different women. When asked about these relationships by the Post, a spokesperson for Peru's National Penitentiary Institute responded, "He was approved for conjugal visits. He has the same rights as any other prisoner."
He told me at one time that he could play online gambling. He had a cell phone for a while. He called me.
As shocking as this may seem to the public, it doesn't seem like much of a surprise to a former childhood friend who shared, "He's a player and has always been a player. Women have always been attracted to him for some reason." So while Van Der Sloot's time in prison has been bizarre by US standards, at least he remains behind bars, paying the consequences for taking the lives of 2 young women.
The bizarre Menendez Brothers case was one of the biggest news stories to break in the early 90s. What followed was decades of tiny cells, prison fights, and a surprising new development in the case. In August 1989, Lyle and Eric Menendez reported that their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, had been killed.
Don't kill my parents. Pardon me? Don't kill my
It wasn't until March 1990 that the brothers became suspects, after their psychologist's girlfriend told the police they'd confessed to the murder. After 2 lengthy trials in which both Lyle and Eric claimed they were sexually abused by their father, they were found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. In a 2005 interview with People, Eric, who married Tammy Ruth Sackerman while in prison, gave a glimpse of his life behind bars, saying, "The cell I live in is tiny, about 6 foot by 4 foot. 2 people live in the cell. The cell is so small that only one person can be up off the bunks at a time. There is a commode and a sink. The one upside was that he had a window so he could look outside, but prison life was still rough. According to Eric, the thing you have to get used to in prison are the violent noises. It is very difficult to live with. He added that fights broke out regularly. At the time, it had been 9 years since he'd seen Lyle, and it would be over 20 years before the Menendez brothers saw each other again. During that time, Lyle and Eric communicated through the mail. Meanwhile, both brothers spent their days doing good deeds in their respective prisons. Eric offered comfort to inmates with terminal illnesses, while Lyle helped those who'd experienced sexual trauma. In 2003, Lyle married his second wife, Rebecca Sneed, telling People, "Our interaction tends to be very free of distractions, and we probably have more intimate conversations than most married spouses do, who are distracted by life's events."
Under California law, conjugal visits are not allowed for those sentenced to life without parole.
After spending 22 years in different facilities, in 2018, Lyle was transferred to Eric's prison in San Diego, California, and the brothers reunited. Journalist Robert Rand told ABC News, "They just hugged each other for a few minutes without saying any words to each other. Then the prison officials let them spend an hour together in a room." At the time, Eric was assigned to a different part of the prison, but a few months later he was transferred to where Lyle was housed. Since then, the Menendez brothers have seen each other daily, sharing meals and enjoying the fresh air in the prison yard. Although Eric described the first period of prison life as rough, he and Lyle settled into their incarcerated life and have accomplished a lot over the years. In an interview with A&E, Rand shared, "What's really important about Lyle and Eric in 2022 is that they are both contributing quite a bit to their prison community. Lyle is very involved in prison reform activism. Both brothers are working together on a large mural being painted on the grey concrete walls at the prison." Rand added, "Eric leads several self-help groups every week at Donovan, including a mindful meditation group, and has started a hospice group at Donovan."
He helped me in a lot of ways, man. Mentally, helped me ground myself.
Despite their contributions to life at the prison, former corrections officer Hector Bravo Ferrell described the Menendez brothers as having a, quote, "sense of entitlement," according to the New York Post. However, according to fellow inmate Anna Ray X-Rated Brown, Lyle and Eric helped him a great deal by encouraging him to change his life while locked up. Brown told the Post, "Lyle was the guy who started teaching me the value of utilizing my popularity to my advantage in a way where I can be influential for positive things. He was the first person to say, 'Hey man, I think you should sign up for these classes. There's another way to do your time.'"